I'm Greg Riddoch, the former manager of the San Diego Padres. From 1990 through 92, I was a coach for their 4 years prior to that, and enjoyed probably much of that. But that's later on in what my career was. And where it really got started is a gentleman who became my mentor, who also signed me out of college, was Bob Howsam. And he's a fellow who had built the world champion Cardinals with Brock and Gibson, and left the Cardinals in 1967, and I was one of their top picks that year, and by 1970 we were in the World Series. The first ever professional baseball draft was in 1965. Before that, the Yankees and the Dodgers and everybody ran around the country with the money and signed the best players. So they tried to create parity in baseball by having the last team draft first so that there would be some parity. So in my sophomore year in college, I had a really good year my sophomore year. I had no idea there was a thing called a draft. On June 6th, my phone rang, and this guy said, "This is Herc Robinson of the Baltimore Orioles. We have picked you number 2 in the first ever professional baseball draft." I didn't even know what it was. But when you want to start talking about a guy, there is a method to his madness. Most of the stuff that he came to the Reds with were Rickyism things from Branch Rickey that he learned with the Cardinals. He also brought Sparky Anderson and Vern Rapp and Chief Bender and Ron Plaza. He brought all of these guys from the Cardinals
the Bowdens over from
to the, what's that?
He brought the Bowdens over from Pittsburgh.
In the scouting side.
Rex and Joe Bowen.
And Joe Bowen. Well, even a lot of these people even originally were with the Pirates years ago.
Right,
Then they filtered, that's how baseball works, they filtered on to St. Louis Cardinals, and then when Mr. Howsam came to the Reds, he brought those people to the Reds. And I can remember distinctly the first spring training I went to, there were guys 38 years old playing in Double-A for the Reds. And I can remember Chief Bender standing up on that platform out there, calling them over like by 15 guys, calling out their names and saying, "You guys have all been released, go see Lois Snyder to get your check and your plane ticket home." So they were in this thing where Mr. Howsam said, "We are going to start going with young players, and you guys are the first group that we're going to start going with." And that's kind of when it all started, and 3 years later we were in a World Series.
And you were going to be an umpire.
Yeah, an umpire. I was going to go to the, Barney Deary was the head of the umpire development thing.
Yep.
Rex Bowen at that time was the scouting director, and my dad had just started working for the Reds, so I met Rex and told him I was interested in umpiring. I was doing high school and
In
American.
67?
Yeah.
I played 4 or 5 years, I can't remember now at my age. I played 4 or 5 years in the minor leagues. And so then at the end of 1972, I was playing in Three Rivers, and my manager, Jim Snyder, cornered me and said, "Look, the Reds have talked, and they think you'd make a good manager or a coach, and we'd like you to come back next year as either a manager or a coach." And I used to substitute teach in the off season because I had my degree.
Well, Mr. Howsam brought over the Bowen brothers from Pittsburgh, and they went back to the Branch Rickey theory of looking for guys that could run and throw, tool guys. And they figured that, and they went for younger kids. They went for high school kids, and they looked for guys that they could develop. And and that was their theory. That's why we were successful. I think during the 70s, our scouting staff and stuff, we signed, Bench. And Bench wasn't even the first round drafters. I think.
Wayne Simpson?
Yeah, Wayne Simpson. That was the guy that my dad had signed. Wayne Simpson was out from Southern Cal.
Bernie Carbo?
Bernie Carbo. In fact, Bernie Carbo went in front of Johnny Bench in the draft.
Yeah, so.
And a lot of people don't know Johnny Bench wasn't a catcher in high school.
He's a pitcher.
Pitcher, and he played shortstop. And Tony Ribello saw him and made a catcher out of him. Another thing that the Reds, they brought over from the Pittsburgh was tryout camps. In other words, I think Danny Dreesen, a guy that they signed early, was out of a tryout camp.
So Harry Spillman.
Yeah, they went to look at Paul Dreesen, his brother, and they signed Danny out of a camp. There's a lot of guys. They believed in going to little things because a lot of guys may be overlooked in the draft, and you come up with some. I signed a guy out of later on, a guy out of a draft named Bobby Ayala that pitched in the big leagues out of a non-drafted guy that came to tryout camp and ended up pitching the big leagues. But and you got to go to a lot of areas that maybe weren't really covered by the other scouts, so come up with somebody.
What I learned when these guys taught me the scouting tools is I learned my follows in my territory. So I'd have a camp, a tryout camp when I was scouting, and all these kids would come, and I might see a kid that was clocked at 84 miles an hour that was in 9th grade in the bullpen, and I went, I'm putting him on my list to follow him. So I not only just got people from the camp to suggest to the scouting director to sign, but I found a whole bunch of follows that I could follow in my territory for the next 2 or 3 years until to see if they got better.